Thank you so much
Pleasure.
for speaking with us, and congratulations on creating such a wonderful festival.
Well, it was Jia Zhang-ke's invention. I mean, the whole idea for us was to try and help him fulfill his dreams, and at the same time, by fulfilling his dreams, I would finally also fulfill my dream of creating a filmmakers film festival in this country. Because my past experiences have been experience of complete separations, complete separation between the people who make the films and the people who come and see the films.
I mean, you've directed some very prestigious festivals, Locarno, Venice, Rome, but perhaps in a way this has been your biggest challenge yet. What did spark the original idea, and what did you hope to achieve?
Well, first of all, I had to come full circle because I came to China in the mid-70s to continue my research as an anthropologist. I have been told there and then that anthropology, ethnology were bourgeois sciences, and that if I wanted to pursue any kind of research in the field of oral literature, I should have chosen mass literature, which I did. So I did my MA in mass literature in Manchuria, in the Northeast, and I eventually, became enamored with Chinese film, because what happened was very simply that as soon as the Cultural Revolution was over, I discovered an underground, hidden continent of films. Because the old films, the films made between 1949 and 1965, became available. So I discovered, literally, I was certainly following the key classes. At that point, I was doing my PhD in Nanjing, so I had more free time. But I would normally watch 2 old films every day. And so when I returned to Italy, I worked for the first time in a festival in 1978. The Pesaro Film Festival did a panorama of Chinese cinema. But none of the films that had really touched me, that spurred my interest for Chinese films, were included in that selection, because the selection was still pretty official. It was done as an exchange between the embassies. So I decided I wanted to create my own festival of Chinese film, which I eventually did in Turin in 1981. It was probably, even up to this day, the largest scale retrospective of Chinese cinema to ever be organized in Western Europe. And starting from that, I did not know that by doing that, I was bound to become a professional festival manufacturer. So a professional festival manufacturer who started with ideas of sharing his emotions in watching Chinese films had to come back to China and put to profit all of my experiences in inventing, festivals of a different kind.
Mm-hmm. And what do you see that the role of film festivals is? And what do you see the role of this one in particular?
Well, in that sense, you really have to differentiate between the role of film festivals in the Western world, where, festivals have now, in the Western world, they have now become again an ersatz of everything that doesn't work in the circuit of distribution and circulation of films. They really have become a parallel network of distribution, because if you don't go to those festivals, you will probably miss out on some of the new emerging talents and of the new emerging realities in film. But here it is very specific. It really has to create an awareness for film qualities that would probably not necessarily be included in the Hollywood blockbusters that dominate the China market.
As you've been mentioning, you've been incredibly passionate about bringing Asian cinema to the Western world, and you've always worked hard to showcase those films, especially in Venice. Is your role a bit the opposite now in some ways in showcasing talent from Europe and the US here?
But you see, that is also why we have chosen Melville as the subject of our first retrospective. Because we needed that kind of crossfire, you know. Melville was a filmmaker who was not only enamored with classic Hollywood film noir, but he was also watching a lot of Japanese gangster films, and he derived his own individual style also from those non-Western experiences. And in turn, you know, Asian directors, of course, primarily, I mean, those key Hong Kong directors like John Woo, Johnny To, found in Melville's film a non-Western film language that would immediately attract them and that could stay as a reference for some of the experiments they also attempted on their own. You know, I mean, when I was talking to Michael Mann a few months ago, sadly Michael had to attend a big event in France right at the time of our festival, so he could not come here, but I hope he will probably, I hope he can visit us next year. Michael Mann was telling me, you know, Melville's influence has been also quite subliminal, because I never knew while inventing a new film that I would have traces of Melville in my films. And so in that sense, it was really also, I started doing that, in fact, last year in Macau, but it didn't really work because then I resigned and I left the festival. I had asked 10 major Asian filmmakers to choose a European, a non-American Western genre film that could really be called a reference for them, and it was the result was really amazing. So next year we are probably going to follow that line. I mean, the idea that there is an osmotic process, I mean, in the connection between Eastern cinema and Western cinema is at the core of this festival. That is also why on the first night we presented John Woo with an award that it is called Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon East-West Award. I mean, in a way, this should be a festival of cultural diplomacy. So we need cultural ambassadors.
I mean, China has become the world's second and potentially one of the largest markets for films. And some actually make more money here than in the US, thinking of things like Fast and the Furious. But this festival also seems to go towards smaller productions and, you know, emerging talent. Is that something that you see there's a growing market for as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you see, I was telling you that my task here is to fulfill Jia Zhang-ke's dream, to create the kind of festival he has attended. I mean, he always said, I spent 1/3 of my adult life in foreign international film festival. Why can't we have an international film festival in my home province? And Pingyao is the perfect place because it's so condensed. You can be really focused. You can really have an ideal hospitable environment so that people can come together quite naturally. But you see, in addition to all of this, the other key factor is that last October, the October of last year, better to say, the Art Cinema Alliance have been created and officially launched. I think Pingyao is the natural ally of the Art Cinema Alliance, so we should really have the possibility of using the festival as a platform for, I mean, the platform to create visibility, to create interest, to create excitement about those very special films that will then have a longer life in the theaters because of this festival.
What kind of support did you have to launch this festival? Because it can't have been an easy task to get this from nothing to this incredible.
You know, I mean, obviously, Jia Zhang-ke himself is a very strong label. So him being a strong label means that he can work both ways, that he can get support from the local, provincial and central government, but he can also immediately talk to some of the big private groups in this country, and get them to be our partners, our sponsors, even when the project is so specific and geared to something that is not necessarily, I mean, a mass, targeted for a mass audience. I mean, but you know, one of the small, one of the commercial ads we played before the films, the one with the SUV cars, has been shot by Jia Zhang-ke. So, in that sense, I mean, it's also very important that he has learned to be a cultural entrepreneur.
Yeah. And perhaps just thinking about the context we're in, you know, the regulations that do exist here in China, what kind of freedom did you have in terms of putting your festival together?
But it's quite obvious that, I mean, without saying that we had to impose a lot of self-censorship on ourselves, I had to avoid sending to the censors films with excessive violence, explicit sex, frontal nudity. I mean, it would have not made any sense, you know, to test the limitations that we know do exist. So by knowing the context, I really tried to focus more on the kind of films that could really have the possibility of attracting diverse group of viewers. And I must say that, I mean, just think, you know, I mean, we played The Square. I mean, if you have seen the film, I mean, it's not an easy film to grasp, but the censors went for the moral, for the ethical significance of the film, so they passed it. Arnaud Desplechin's film, which is playing tonight, I mean, it's a very, I mean, the nouveau roman structure of the film would have made it difficult for a different kind of censors to understand the film, but they went for it. I mean, we have been quite lucky because we were talking to cultured, educated censors who would see more than just, you know, the trivial, the really trivial fragments of partial nudity in the films.
And you've called it Pingyao Year Zero rather than Year One. What did you want to achieve for this year, and what are your ambitions for the future?
Well, I mean, this is also a question that should be asked to Jia Zhang-ke. I mean, the answers will have to be shared with him, in the sense that for him it is very important that Pingyao will stay alive, that our festival complex, that this whole area will stay alive all through the year. For me, I mean, the target was, can we finally create a filmmakers film festival in this country? A place where things would happen simply because we have been facilitators of different kinds of encounters. You know, of course, the first and most important one is filmmakers and audience, because our audience is so young that they really are a good test audience for China distributors to understand which films can eventually make it even on the bigger theatrical circuit. I mean, not just on VOD platforms. But the second encounter is, of course, Chinese filmmakers and Western sales agents, festival directors. I mean, we are very happy to have a lot of festival delegates coming to Pingyao to discover some of the films. I mean, we are even showing to it's not open to the press, because we also have a work in progress lab where we show unfinished films to festival directors, who then probably, I mean, start showing an interest for those titles even before the films are completed. And what is also important is to create an opportunity, and that is why I was so keen on having the festival in a place where once you're outside you have like 20 tiny restaurants and food joints, because then what happens in places like Telluride or Sundance. Well, filmmakers do start to meet, and they, when you come to Pingyao and you travel 12 hours, 13, 14 hours, I mean, you are certainly going to stay in Pingyao for more than the usual 2 or 3 days, because I'm sure that a lot of filmmakers have been complaining about the fact that, I'm sure that a lot of filmmakers you have met in the past complain about the fact that they never have a chance to see other people's film. Here, since the target is penetration in the China market, that kind of task only requests your full attention for a day and a half. And then they will be here, they will watch other people's films, and they might even like the idea that they can have a stiff midnight drink in one of those very not touristy and very typical joints.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. It was such a pleasure to speak with you.